Steve Harvey humiliated a racist contestant who targeted a black senior, and what happened next will shock you. This isn't just another viral moment. This is the story of a man who was invisible to the world finally being seen, and the price the racist paid for underestimating both of them. In the next few minutes, you are going to witness the exact moment when one act of courage changed everything. Marcus Washington was 62 years old, and nobody saw him anymore. Not because he was quiet, not because he tried to disappear, but because the world had decided he didn't matter. 3 years. That's how long Marcus had been living on the streets of Atlanta. 3 years of waking up on concrete. 3 years of people walking past him like he was furniture. 3 years of being erased. But here, that's the thing about invisibility, doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow death. A gradual disappearing act that starts the moment your circumstances change. Marcus used to be somebody. He had a job, he had an apartment, he had a life that made sense. He was a maintenance supervisor at a hospital for 28 years. 28 years of showing up, doing the work, being reliable. He had coworkers who respected him. He had a routine. He had dignity. Then came the layoffs. Then came the medical bills. Then came the eviction notice. And just like that, Marcus Washington became invisible. The streets don't care about your resume. They don't care that you worked for 3 decades. They don't care about your skills or your reliability or your character. The streets only care about one thing, whether you have money. And when you don't, you stop existing in people's minds. Marcus would sit on the same corner for hours. People would step over him, literally step over him. A woman once kicked his leg because he was in her way. She didn't apologize. She didn't even make eye contact. To her, he wasn't a person, he was an obstacle. His sister Nicole would visit him. She'd bring food and clothes and tears. She'd tell him, "Marcus, you are still in there. I see you. I know who you are." But even Nicole couldn't protect him from the invisibility. Nobody could. The worst part wasn't the hunger. It wasn't the cold nights or the fear or the physical pain of sleeping on concrete. The worst part was the psychological erasure. It was looking in people's eyes and seeing nothing, no recognition, no humanity. Just the blank stare of someone looking at an inconvenience. Marcus started talking to himself just to remember that he had a voice. He'd recite facts about himself out loud. "My name is Marcus Washington. I am 62 years old. I worked at Grady Hospital for 28 years. I have a sister named Nicole. I have 2 nephews. I am a good man." He said it because if he didn't say it, he might forget it himself. Then one day, everything shifted. Nicole brought him a letter. It was worn from being carried in her purse, but the words were clear. Family Feud auditions, they were coming. To Atlanta. They wanted families to apply. Marcus looked at the letter like it was written in a language he didn't understand. "You going to audition?" Nicole said. It wasn't a question, it was a declaration. "Nicole, no," Marcus said. "I am noti kinti you going to audition," she repeated. "You going to get on that stage. You going to be on national television, and the whole world is going to see what I see." "What do you see?" Marcus asked. "I see my brother," Nicole said. "I see a good man. I see someone who deserves to be seen." Marcus wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that he was still in there somewhere, that the invisibility was temporary, that he could be visible again. But hope is dangerous when you have been invisible for 3 years. Hope means disappointment. Hope means your heart can break all over again. Still, Marcus filled out the application. He borrowed clothes from a shelter. He practiced answers in the mirror. He imagined what it would feel like to stand under those lights, to have thousands of people looking at him, to finally matter again. The day they announced the selected families, Marcus's hands were shaking. He was selected. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus Washington was going to be seen. Not just by his sister, not just by the people on his corner who pretended he didn't exist, but by millions of people on national television. His family celebrated. Nicole cried. His nephews James and David said, "Uncle Marcus is going to be on TV." They said it like it was the most natural thing in the world, like their uncle wasn't invisible, like he'd never stopped mattering. Marcus allowed himself to feel something dangerous, hope. He didn't know that hope was about to be tested in ways he couldn't imagine. The week before the taping, Marcus prepared like his life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. He practiced Family Feud questions with Nicole. She'd ask the survey questions and Marcus would answer. His answers were thoughtful, they were genuine. They came from a man who had lived a real life and had real experiences. Name something you'd do if you won the lottery, Nicole would say. Get a house, Marcus would answer. A real house, with a door that locks and a bed that is mine. Name a job that requires you to be on your feet all day, Nicole would say. Maintenance supervisor, Marcus would answer. I did that for 28 years. Every answer was honest. Every answer revealed a man who had worked hard, who had dignity, who had a story worth telling. The night before the taping, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay on his cot in the shelter and thought about what it would mean to be visible again. Not just visible, but seen. Really seen. He thought about his nephews watching him on television. He thought about people seeing him and recognizing him as a human being. He thought about the moment when the lights would hit his face and he would finally stop being invisible. The morning of the taping, Marcus put on the borrowed suit. It didn't fit perfectly, but it was clean. It was respectful. It was the suit of a man who mattered. When he walked into the Family Feud studio, something shifted inside him. The lights were blinding. The energy was electric. And for the first time in 3 years, people were looking at him. Not through him, not past him, at him. His family was in the audience. When they saw him walk out onto that stage, they erupted. Nicole was screaming his name. James was jumping up and down. David was pointing at his uncle on the stage like he was the most important person in the world, because to them, he was. Marcus stood on that stage, and for just a moment, he felt it. He felt the weight lifting. He felt the invisibility cracking. He felt like Marcus Washington again, a man who existed, who mattered, who had value. Steve Harvey was there to greet him. Warm smile. Strong handshake. Welcome to Family Feud, Marcus. Tell me about yourself. Marcus opened his mouth to answer. He was ready. He was visible. He was finally going to be seen. But he had no idea what was waiting for him on the other side of that introduction. Because standing across from him was a contestant named Daniel. And Daniel had already decided exactly how he was going to use this moment on national television. The first round of Family Feud started like any other. Steve asked the survey questions. Marcus's family answered. They were doing well, not winning, but holding their own. Marcus felt the energy of the stage, the lights, the audience, his family cheering behind him. For the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. He was part of something. He mattered. He could hear Nicole's voice above all the others. That's right, Marcus. Come on, baby. His nephews were jumping in their seats, pointing at their uncle like he was a celebrity. And in that moment, to them, he was. Marcus answered the first few questions with confidence. His answers were practical, grounded in real experience. When Steve asked, "Name something you find at a hospital," Marcus answered, "Medical charts." The audience applauded. He was doing this. He was really doing this. Then it was Daniel's turn to answer. Daniel was in his early 30s, confident, the kind of guy who looked comfortable in front of cameras. He had that easy swagger of someone who never had to worry about being invisible. His family was cheering loudly, almost aggressively, like they were trying to dominate the energy in the room. Steve asked the question, "Name something you might find in a homeless person's pocket." The room went quiet. Marcus felt it before he understood it. A shift in the energy. A tension that hadn't been there before. It was like the air itself had changed temperature. The casual, fun atmosphere of the game show suddenly felt dangerous. Daniel looked directly at Marcus, not at the question, not at the game, at Marcus. And he smiled. Not a friendly smile. A smile that said he knew exactly what he was about to do. "Crack cocaine," Daniel said. The audience gasped. Some people laughed nervously. The energy on the stage froze. It was like someone had hit pause on the entire moment. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He felt the blood drain from his face. He felt the invisibility rushing back. But this time it was different. This time, he wasn't invisible because people didn't see him. He was invisible because he'd been reduced to a stereotype, to an assumption, to a judgment. The worst kind of visibility is being seen as less than human. Steve's face hardened immediately. He didn't laugh. He didn't move on casually to the next answer like he might have with a different joke. His expression changed from the warm, charismatic game show host to something harder, something protective. "That's not cool, man," Steve said quietly. But Daniel wasn't done. He wasn't satisfied with one cruel comment. He needed to push further. He needed to make sure everyone understood exactly what he thought about people like Marcus. "I'm just saying what everybody's thinking," Daniel said, shrugging like it was obvious. Like it was common sense. Like he was just stating facts. Homeless people use drugs. That's why they were homeless. The audience booed loudly. Some people stood up. The applause that had been warm and welcoming just moments before turned into disapproval. The energy in the studio shifted completely. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He wanted to say something. He wanted to tell Daniel about the 28 years at Grady Hospital. He wanted to explain about the layoffs that weren't his fault. He wanted to talk about the medical bills that bankrupted him. He wanted to describe the eviction notice that came when he couldn't pay rent anymore. He wanted to say that he wasn't a statistic. He wasn't a stereotype. He was a man who had worked hard his entire life and had fallen on circumstances beyond his control. He wanted to say that addiction doesn't discriminate, but neither does bad luck. He wanted to say that he never touched drugs in his life. He wanted to say so many things, but he couldn't find his voice. The invisibility had trained him well. He spent 3 years learning to be silent, learning to take it, learning not to fight back because fighting back only made things worse. But Steve Harvey found his voice. "Hold on," Steve said. He stepped toward Daniel. His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made the entire studio go silent. This wasn't Steve, the game show host, anymore. This was Steve the man. Steve the human being who'd seen enough injustice to recognize it immediately. "You see that man right there?" Steve pointed at Marcus. His finger was steady. His gaze was unwavering. "That S a human being. That S somebody S brother. That S somebody S uncle. And you don't get to reduce him to your ignorance." The audience erupted in applause. People were on their feet now. Daniel tried to laugh it off, tried to make it seem like it was all just a joke that people weren't getting. "I was just—" "No," Steve cut him off sharply. His voice had an edge to it now. "You weren't just anything. You made a choice. You had a moment on national television, and you chose to be cruel to a man who's been through more than you could imagine." Steve turned to Marcus. His expression softened completely. The hardness melted away, replaced by genuine compassion. It was the look of someone who understood what it meant to be judged unfairly. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you on this stage. You came here to have a good time with your family, and this man decided to use you as a punchline. That's not right." Marcus felt something break open inside him, not in a bad way, in a way that felt like healing, like someone had finally seen the real him, like someone with power and influence had decided that his dignity mattered. "That's okay," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the emotions churning inside him. "I appreciate you standing up for me." "It's not okay," Steve said firmly. He turned back to Daniel, and his voice carried the weight of judgment. "And you need to understand something. When you mock someone for being homeless, you were not being funny. You were being a coward. You were punching down at someone who's already down, and that says everything about your character." Steve paused, letting his words sink in. The studio was completely silent now. Everyone was watching. Everyone was listening. "You see, there's a difference between humor and cruelty," Steve continued. "Humor brings people together. Cruelty tears them apart. And what you did right now at cruelty, that was you deciding that your comfort was more important than another person's dignity." The audience erupted in applause and cheers. People were standing, clapping, some with tears in their eyes. Daniel's face went red. He looked angry. He looked embarrassed. He looked like someone who'd been caught being exactly who he was. He looked like someone who Dee expected to get away with it, and couldn't he believe that he hadn't he? But more importantly, Marcus felt something shift inside him. He felt seen, not just by the lights or the cameras or the audience, but by Steve Harvey, by a man with power and influence who chose to use it to defend him, by someone who could have let it slide, could have moved on, could have pretended it didn't happen but didn't. Steve had chosen to stand up for him, and that choice meant everything. The game continued, but everything had changed. Marcus' family was on their feet. Nicole was crying not tears of sadness, but tears of pride and vindication. James and David were cheering so loudly that security had to ask them to sit down, and Marcus stood a little taller. He spoke a little louder. He answered the questions with confidence because he remembered he was still Marcus Washington. The layoffs didn't define him. The homelessness didn't define him. Daniel's cruelty didn't define him. What defined him was how he responded, and he responded with dignity. When the next question came, Marcus answered without hesitation. His voice was clear. His answers were thoughtful. He was no longer invisible. He was no longer a statistic. He was a man competing on a game show with his family, and he was going to finish this game with his head held high. By the end of the round, Marcus' family had won the game. The scoreboard showed their victory in bright lights. But that wasn't the victory that mattered. The victory was that Marcus Washington had been invisible for 3 years, and on that stage, in front of millions of people, he had finally been seen. Not as a homeless man, not as a statistic, not as a stereotype, not as someone to be pitied or mocked or reduced to a single characteristic, but as a human being who deserved respect, and Steve Harvey had made sure the whole world knew it. As Marcus left the stage, the audience gave him a standing ovation, not because he won the game, but because they witnessed something real. They'd seen a man reclaim his dignity, they'd seen someone with power choose compassion over convenience, and they'd seen that there was still such a thing as justice in this world. The episode aired on a Friday night in prime time. Marcus didn't have a television. He was still living in the shelter, still sleeping on a cot, still waking up to the sounds of other people's suffering. But Nicole brought a laptop to the shelter's common room, and they gathered Marcus, Nicole, James, David, and a handful of other residents who heard that one of their own was going to be on TV. When Marcus walked onto that stage on the screen, the room erupted. People cheered like he was a celebrity, and for those 2 minutes, he felt like one. But it was what came after that changed everything. The clip of Daniel's comment went viral. Within hours, it was everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. News outlets picked it up. Family Feud contestant shamed on national television for homeless stereotype. The clip was viewed millions of times. And with those views came something Marcus hadn't expected: recognition. People started reaching out to Nicole on social media. They wanted to help Marcus. They wanted to donate. They wanted to offer him jobs. They wanted to tell him that his story mattered. They wanted to tell him that he wasn't invisible anymore. By Monday morning, there were over 50,000 messages. Nicole sat with Marcus in the shelter's office and read some of them to him. "Dear Marcus, I saw you on Family Feud and I was moved by your story. I am a hiring manager at a construction company and we'd like to offer you a job. Marcus, I have a spare apartment in Atlanta. It's yours if you want it, no strings attached. You deserve a second chance. Uncle Marcus, you were my hero. You showed the world what dignity looks like." Marcus listened to these messages and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope that wasn't dangerous. Hope that was real. But with the hope came something else, something darker. The hate messages started coming too. Why are we supposed to feel sorry for homeless people? They made their own choices. This is liberal propaganda. Stop trying to make us feel guilty for being successful. Family Feud should have banned that guy for telling the truth. Marcus read these messages and felt the weight of the world's judgment pressing down on him again. For every person who wanted to help, there was someone who wanted to hurt. For every message of compassion, there was one dripping with cruelty. But the help was winning. By the end of the week, Marcus had received 3 legitimate job offers: A tech company wanted to hire him as a facilities manager. A nonprofit wanted him to work in their homeless outreach program. A construction company wanted him to supervise their maintenance crews. He chose the nonprofit. It felt right. After 3 years of being invisible, Marcus wanted to spend his life making sure other people didn't have to experience what he experienced. He wanted to be the person who saw people, who recognized their humanity, who refused to let them disappear. The job came with a salary, a modest one, but enough. Enough to get an apartment, enough to buy clothes, enough to start rebuilding his life. Nicole helped him find a small one-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. It wasn't too much, just a studio apartment with a kitchenette and a bathroom, but it was his. He had a key. He had a lock. He had a door that closed and a bed that was his alone. The first night, Marcus lay in that bed and cried. Not tears of sadness, tears of relief, tears of gratitude, tears of the weight of 3 years finally lifting. He had his dignity back. But the story didn't end there, because Daniel was still out there, and Daniel's family was furious. They started their own social media campaign. They claimed that Daniel had been unfairly portrayed. They said that Steve Harvey had bullied him on national television. They demanded an apology. They demanded that the clip be taken down. They demanded that Marcus be held accountable for ruining Daniel's life. Because Daniel had lost his job after the episode aired, Daniel's employer had fired him, not because of the comment itself, but because of the backlash. The company didn't want to be associated with someone who mocked homeless people on national television. Daniel's family was blaming Marcus for this. They were saying that Marcus had orchestrated the whole thing, that he set Daniel up to make him look bad. None of it was true. Marcus hadn't orchestrated anything. He simply shown up and been himself. He allowed the world to see him, and the world had responded. But Daniel's family didn't want to hear that. They wanted someone to blame, and Marcus was the easiest target. The hate messages intensified. Daniel's family members tracked down Marcus's new address and showed up at his apartment building. They left threatening notes. They called his new job and tried to get him fired. They created fake social media accounts in his name and posted inflammatory content. Marcus went to the police. The police said there wasn't much they could do. It was harassment, but it was hard to prove. It was intimidation, but not quite threatening enough to constitute a crime. So Marcus did what he learned to do over 3 years of homelessness he endured. He kept going to work. He kept showing up. He kept being visible, even when visibility came with a price. And slowly, the hate died down. Daniel's family moved on to other targets. The news cycle shifted. People forgot about the Family Feud episode. But Marcus didn't forget. He thought about Daniel often. He thought about how a single moment on television had destroyed Daniel's life. He thought about how a cruel comment had consequences that Daniel probably never expected. He thought about how visibility could be a weapon as easily as it could be salvation. One day, about 6 months after the episode aired, Marcus received a letter. It was addressed to him at the nonprofit office. The return address said, Daniel Martinez. Marcus almost threw it away, but something made him open it. The letter was handwritten. The handwriting was shaky, like the person writing it was struggling with emotion. Dear Marcus, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to even read this, but I need to say something, and you're the only person who deserves to hear it. I was a coward. What I said on Family Feud was cruel and ignorant and wrong. I said it because I thought it would make me look tough. I thought it would get a laugh. I thought it didn't matter because you were just some homeless guy on a game show. I was wrong. Losing my job was the best thing that ever happened to me. I know that sounds strange, but it's true. It forced me to confront who I was. It forced me to understand that my words have power, that my choices have consequences, that the things I say can hurt people. I've been in therapy for the last 6 months. I've been doing a lot of work on myself. And I've come to understand that I was afraid. I was afraid of people like you because you represented something that scared me, the idea that bad things can happen to good people. The idea that I'm not as safe as I thought I was. The idea that I could end up where you ended up. So I mocked you. I reduced you to a stereotype. I made you less than human in my mind so that I wouldn't have to see myself in you. I'm sorry. I am genuinely sorry. I've donated to the nonprofit where you work. I am volunteering with a homeless outreach program. I am trying to be better. I am trying to understand that compassion isn't weakness, that seeing people isn't dangerous, that we were all just one bad break away from falling. You didn't ruin my life, Marcus. You saved it. You showed me who I was, and you gave me the chance to become someone better. I hope one day you can forgive me. Daniel Marcus read the letter 3 times. He didn't know what to feel. He didn't know if forgiveness was something he owed Daniel. He didn't know if this letter was genuine or just another form of manipulation. But he knew one thing: it mattered. It mattered that Daniel had taken responsibility. It mattered that Daniel had done the work. It mattered that Daniel had tried to become better. Marcus wrote back, "Dear Daniel, I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, not because the pain you caused doesn't matter, but because forgiveness is the only way I know how to stay free. You were right about one thing: we were all one bad break away from falling, and we were all one act of compassion away from rising back up. I hope you keep doing the work. I hope you keep growing. I hope you keep understanding that our words have power and our choices have consequences. And I hope that one day you can forgive yourself the way I am forgiving you." Marcus, he never heard from Daniel again. But he didn't need to, because Marcus had learned something important on that Family Feud stage. He learned that visibility could be dangerous, but it could also be transformative. It could change lives. It could force people to confront who they really were. And sometimes that was exactly what the world needed. 6 months into his job at the nonprofit, Marcus had helped over 200 people find housing. He connected them with resources. He advocated for them. He seen them. He made sure they knew they mattered. But the work was exhausting. Every day, Marcus encountered people who were invisible just like he'd been invisible. People with stories, people with skills, people with dignity that the world had decided didn't matter anymore. And every day, he tried to change that. He tried to be the person he needed when he was on the streets. Some days it worked. Some days he helped someone get into an apartment, get a job, get their life back on track. Those days felt like miracles. Other days he'd lose someone. Someone he'd been working with for months would disappear back into the streets, or worse. And those days felt like failures, even though Marcus knew intellectually that he couldn't save everyone. Nicole noticed the toll it was taking on him. "You burning out," she said one evening when they were having dinner at Marcus's apartment. It was a small place, but it was clean and it was his, and that still felt like a miracle. "I'm fine," Marcus said, but they both knew it wasn't true. "You were not fine," Nicole said gently. "You trying to save everyone because you remember what it felt like to be invisible. But you can't save everyone, Marcus. You can only do your best." "My best isn't good enough," Marcus said. "There are thousands of people out there, thousands of invisible people, and I am just one person." "You were one person who's already changed hundreds of lives," Nicole said. "That's not nothing." Marcus knew she was right, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it in your heart are 2 different things. The breaking point came on a cold December night, almost a year after the Family Feud episode. Marcus was working late at the nonprofit office, going through case files, when he got a call from one of his outreach workers. "Marcus, you need to come to the shelter on Peachtree Street. We have a situation." When Marcus arrived, he found a young woman couldn't have been more than 25 sitting in the shelter's medical room. She was malnourished. She was sick. She was terrified. Her name was Sarah. "How long have you been on the streets?" Marcus asked gently, sitting down across from her. 3 months, Sarah said quietly. "I left home because my parents didn't accept me. I am transgender. They said I was going to hell. They said I was an abomination." Marcus felt his heart break. He'd encountered so many young people like Sarah. Kids who'd been rejected by their families. Kids who had nowhere to go. Kids who'd been made invisible by the very people who should have loved them most. "We were going to help you," Marcus said. "I promise." But it wasn't that simple. Sarah needed more than just housing. She needed medical care. She needed mental health support. She needed a family. She needed someone to tell her that she wasn't an abomination, that she was worthy of love exactly as she was. Marcus started spending extra time with Sarah. He helped her get into a transitional housing program. He connected her with a therapist who specialized in LGBTQ+ issues. He sat with her while she cried about her family. He listened to her talk about the pain of being rejected. And slowly, Sarah started to heal. But while Marcus was focused on Sarah, he was neglecting other cases. Other people started falling through the cracks. People he should have been helping weren't getting the support they needed. One of them was a man named Robert. Robert was 68 years old. He'd been on the streets for 5 years. He had diabetes and heart problems and arthritis. He needed consistent medical care and stable housing. Marcus had been working on Robert's case for months. They were close to getting him into a senior housing program. They were close to getting him stable. But then Marcus got distracted with Sarah's case, and Robert's paperwork got lost in the shuffle. One morning, Marcus got a call. Robert had suffered a heart attack on the streets. He was in the hospital. He was stable, but he was scared. Marcus rushed to the hospital. When he saw Robert, he felt the weight of his failure crush him. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, taking Robert's hand. "I'm so sorry. I should have moved faster on your housing application. I should have made sure you were safe." Robert squeezed his hand weakly. "It's not your fault, Marcus," Robert said. "You can save everyone. You were just one person." But Marcus knew the truth. He made a choice. He prioritized Sarah over Robert. And Robert had paid the price. That night, Marcus sat in his apartment and seriously considered quitting. He thought about going back to work as a facilities manager. He thought about leaving the nonprofit world behind. He thought about accepting that he couldn't change the system, that one person couldn't make a difference, that the invisibility was too big, too systemic, too entrenched. He thought about giving up, but then Nicole called. "How's Robert?" she asked. "He is stable," Marcus said, "but he had a heart attack because I wasn't paying attention to his case." "Marcus, listen to me," Nicole said firmly. "You are not responsible for every homeless person in Atlanta. You are not responsible for Robert's health problems. You are responsible for doing your job with integrity and compassion, and you do that every single day." "But I failed him," Marcus said. "No," Nicole said. "You were human, you made a mistake, and now you were going to learn from it and do better. That's what growth looks like." After they hung up, Marcus sat in the darkness of his apartment and thought about what Nicole had said. He thought about the 3 years he'd been invisible. He thought about how Steve Harvey had stood up for him. He thought about how that one moment had changed his entire life. He thought about how one person's choice to see him had rippled out and affected hundreds of other people. And he realized something important. He couldn't save everyone, but he could do his job with integrity and compassion, and that was enough. The next day, Marcus went back to work with renewed purpose. He apologized to Robert. He personally oversaw Robert's housing application. He made sure Robert got into the senior housing program. He made sure Robert had access to medical care. And he restructured his work so that he could help people like Sarah without neglecting people like Robert. He hired 2 new case managers. He delegated more responsibility. He created systems and processes that didn't depend entirely on him. He learned that being visible didn't mean being superhuman. It meant being present. It meant showing up. It meant doing the work with integrity, even when you couldn't do it all. 3 months later, Robert moved into his new apartment. It was small, but it was his. He had a door that locked. He had a bed that was his alone. He had access to medical care. And Sarah graduated from the transitional housing program and moved into her own apartment. She started taking classes at community college. She started rebuilding her relationship with her parents, not the way it had been, but in a new way, with new boundaries, with new understanding. Marcus attended both of their apartment warming celebrations. At Robert's apartment, the old man hugged Marcus and said, "You saved my life." "No," Marcus said. "I just did my job. That's what saving a life looks like, Robert said. Someone doing their job with care. At Sarah's apartment, the young woman hugged Marcus and said, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." "I see you," Marcus said, "and I always will." That night, Marcus sat on his own apartment balcony and looked out at the city lights of Atlanta. He thought about the invisible people down there. He thought about all the people who didn't know that they mattered. He thought about how much work there still was to do. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel overwhelmed by it. He felt called to it. He felt like he had a purpose. He felt like his suffering hadn't been wasted. He felt like the 3 years of invisibility had prepared him to see people in ways that others couldn't. And he felt grateful for the Family Feud episode, grateful for Steve Harvey's courage, grateful for Nicole's love, grateful for the second chance he'd been given, and grateful for the opportunity to give other people second chances too. 1 year after Marcus started working at the nonprofit, he received an unexpected phone call. It was from a lawyer. "Mr. Washington," the lawyer said, "I'm calling on behalf of a foundation that wants to discuss funding your work. They have been following your story, and they're interested in expanding your impact." Marcus thought it was a scam at first, but the lawyer gave him a number to call back, and when he did, he found himself connected to the director of the Henderson Foundation, a charitable organization, with millions of dollars dedicated to ending homelessness. "We've been watching what you redoing," the director, a woman named Patricia Henderson, said, "and we think you onto something important. Not just providing housing and services, but creating dignity, creating visibility, creating systems that see people." "I'm just doing my job," Marcus said, uncomfortable with the praise. "Exactly," Patricia said. "And that's what makes it revolutionary. Most people in this field are trying to fix homelessness from the top down. You redoing it from the ground up. You understand what it's like to be invisible because you've been invisible. That's a gift." Patricia offered Marcus a substantial grant to expand his work. Enough money to hire more staff, enough to open a second location, enough to reach more people. But there was a catch. "We want you to tell your story," Patricia said. "We want you to be the face of this work. We want you to speak at conferences. We want you to write about your experience. We want you to help change how people think about homelessness." Marcus hesitated. Being the face of something meant being visible in a way he wasn't sure he was ready for. It meant being vulnerable. It meant having his story dissected and analyzed and debated by people who never experienced what he experienced. But it also meant reaching more people. It meant that his suffering might actually help someone else avoid that suffering. "I'll do it," Marcus said. The grant was approved. The money came through. And suddenly, Marcus had the resources to do the work he'd been dreaming about. He opened a second location in a different neighborhood. He hired 5 new case managers. He created a training program so that other people with lived experience of homelessness could work in the field. And he started speaking. His first speaking engagement was at a conference for nonprofit leaders in Nashville. Marcus was terrified. He'd never spoken publicly before. He'd spent 3 years being invisible, and now he was supposed to stand in front of hundreds of people and tell them his story. Nicole helped him prepare. "Just tell the truth," she said. "That's all you need to do. Tell them what it was like to be invisible. Tell them what it felt like to be seen. Tell them why it matters." When Marcus took the stage, his hands were shaking. But when he looked out at the audience, he saw faces. He saw people who cared. He saw people who wanted to understand. And he told his story. He told them about Grady Hospital. He told them about the layoffs. He told them about the medical bills. He told them about the eviction notice. He told them about 3 years of invisibility. He told them about Family Feud. He told them about Daniel's cruelty. He told them about Steve Harvey's courage. He told them about being seen, and when he finished, the entire audience stood up and applauded. People came up to him afterward with tears in their eyes. "Thank you for reminding me why I do this work," one woman said. "Your story changed my perspective," another said. "I'm going to donate to your nonprofit," a man said. "I want to help you reach more people." Marcus realized something in that moment. His story wasn't just his story anymore. It belonged to everyone who ever felt invisible. It belonged to everyone who ever been reduced to a stereotype. It belonged to everyone who ever been written off as less than human, and by telling it, he was giving voice to all of them. Over the next year, Marcus spoke at dozens of conferences. He was interviewed by major news outlets. He was featured in magazines. He was invited to speak at universities and churches and community centers. And with each speaking engagement, more people wanted to help. More donations came in. More volunteers stepped forward. More people wanted to work in his nonprofit. But success came with its own challenges. As the nonprofit grew, Marcus found himself spending less time doing direct case management and more time doing administrative work. He was in meetings. He was writing grant proposals. He was managing staff. He was building an organization. And he missed the direct work. He missed sitting with people like Robert and Sarah. He missed being the person who saw them. He missed the human connection that had drawn him to this work in the first place. One day, about 18 months after he started at the nonprofit, Marcus sat in his office, a real office now, with a desk and a window, and realized that he was becoming invisible again, not to the world but to himself. He was so focused on building an organization that he'd forgotten why he started it in the first place. That night, he called a staff meeting. "I need to make a change," Marcus said. "I'm going to step back from the day-to-day administrative work. I'm going to hire an executive director to run the organization, and I'm going to go back to doing direct case management work." His staff looked shocked. "But Marcus," his deputy director said, "you were the heart of this organization. You were the one who makes it work." "No," Marcus said. "The organization shouldn't depend on me. It should depend on systems. It should depend on all of you. And I need to remember why I started this work in the first place, because I wanted to see people. I wanted to make sure they knew they mattered." He hired an experienced executive director named James. James had run nonprofits for 20 years. He was brilliant at fundraising and strategic planning and all the things that Marcus struggled with. And Marcus went back to doing what he loved, sitting with people, listening to their stories, helping them rebuild their lives. He took on a caseload of 20 people. He spent time with each of them. He celebrated their victories. He supported them through their struggles. One of his clients was a man named Thomas, who'd been on the streets for 7 years. Thomas had been a musician before homelessness. He'd played guitar in bars and clubs, but addiction had taken that from him. Homelessness had taken everything else. Marcus didn't try to fix Thomas. He didn't judge him. He just saw him. He helped Thomas get into a treatment program. He helped him find housing. And when Thomas was ready, Marcus helped him reconnect with music. 6 months into working with Marcus, Thomas got a job at a music store. He started playing guitar again, just for himself at first, then for friends. Then at open mic nights. One night, Thomas invited Marcus to one of his performances. Marcus sat in the back of a small coffee shop and listened to Thomas play, and he cried. Not because the music was technically perfect, it wasn't, but because Thomas was alive. Thomas was visible. Thomas had reclaimed something that had been taken from him. After the performance, Thomas came over and hugged Marcus. "Thank you," Thomas said. "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." "I see you," Marcus said. And the first always will. That night, Marcus drove home and thought about the journey he'd been on. From invisible to visible, from broken to healing, from alone to surrounded by people who loved him and believed in him. He thought about how one moment on a game show had changed his entire life. He thought about how Steve Harvey's courage had rippled out and affected hundreds of people. He thought about how his suffering had become a gift to others. And he thought about how visibility wasn't just about being seen. It was about seeing others. It was about refusing to let anyone disappear. It was about creating a world where everyone mattered. That was the work. That was the calling. That was the purpose that had emerged from 3 years of invisibility. Marcus pulled into his apartment complex and sat in his car for a moment, looking up at the stars. He thought about Robert, now stable in his senior housing, volunteering at the nonprofit. He thought about Sarah, now in her second year of college, mentoring other young LGBTQ+ people who'd been rejected by their families. He thought about Thomas, now making music again, playing guitar at open mic nights, reminding people that redemption was possible. And he thought about all the people he hadn't met yet, all the invisible people who were waiting to be seen, all the people whose lives could change if someone just took the time to look at them, to listen to them, to recognize their humanity. Marcus got out of his car and looked up at his apartment window. The light was on. His home was waiting for him. And for the first time in a very long time, Marcus Washington felt completely at peace. 5 years after Family Feud, Marcus stood at the opening of his third non-profit location. The renovated warehouse in South Atlanta housed transitional housing, job training, mental health services, and medical clinics, all built on a culture of dignity. Patricia Henderson, director of the Henderson Foundation that funded his work, squeezed his shoulder. "You've exceeded every expectation. We've served 3,000 people," Marcus said, "but there are thousands more who need help." The opening ceremony featured speeches from Robert, now a volunteer mentor, Sarah, now a counselor helping LGBTQ+ youth, and Thomas, teaching guitar lessons after reclaiming his life from addiction. When Marcus spoke, he shared his core message: invisibility is violence, visibility is healing. We change the world by seeing each other. After the ceremony, a young man approached nervously. "Mr. Washington, I am Daniel Martinez Jr. My father passed away 3 months ago. Before he died, he wanted you to know he spent 5 years volunteering with homeless programs. He wanted you to know he was sorry." Daniel Jr. handed Marcus an envelope, a letter from his father, written before his death, expressing gratitude for Marcus's forgiveness and explaining how it had transformed his life into one of integrity and service. Marcus read it 3 times, tears streaming down his face. That night, he invited Daniel Jr. to join the organization. The circle continued, from cruelty to redemption, from invisibility to visibility, from one moment on a stage to a lifetime of impact.